This video is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. With free weekly content and free shipping over $100, you can save 5% site-wide by using the promo code MTGMudsta. I'm also sponsored by Face to Face Games, Canada's premier Magic the Gathering store. Using the promo code MTGMudsta will get you 5% off site-wide, with eligible orders getting free shipping Canada-wide. If you're looking for a direct way to help the channel, please consider joining my Patreon and becoming a member of the generic Goblin Gang. Hey gang, and welcome back to another December bonus game. In today's game, we've got Felix returning with his Tayam Luminous Enigma deck, which is heavily focused on 3 costing or less creatures, and being able to bring them back for maximum value. He keeps Rishkar Pima Renegade, Arcane Signet, Wall of Roots, Forest, Temple of Malady, Fertilid, and Fleshbag Marauder. Max has brought back fan favorite Araumi, which is kind of a reanimator deck, only you make tokens with it, keeping Bloodstained Mire, Swamp, Sunken Hollow, Hostile Hostel, Lotus Petal, Hostage Taker, and a Knight Incarnate. Marie is playing the Gruul Fight Club deck, with Neyith at the helm, keeping a Forest, Sakura Tribe Elder, Apex Altasaur, Mountain, Hunter's Insight, Kolga the Titan Ape, and Shadow in the Warp. Last but not least, Seb has sleeved up a new deck, and Jolene's out to steal your treasures, keeping Unexpected Windfall, Goldvein Pick, Gruul Signet, Hoarding Ogre, 2 Mountains, and 3 Visits. Seb wins the die roll and starts us off. He draws and plays a Mountain. Felix's turn has him playing a Temple of Malady tapped and scries 1. Max plays a Bloodstained Mire, cracking it and losing 1 to find a Swamp. Marie displays a Fabled Passage and passes. Seb draws and plays a Forest, tapping 2 to cast 3 Visits, and goes to find a land before passing. Felix also has a Forest, and pays 2 for an Arcane Signet. Max plays a Swamp, and also pays 2 for a Talisman of Dominance. During his end step, Marie cracks the passage to find a Forest. Marie draws and plays a Mountain, and everyone's got a 2-drop as she casts a Sakura Tribe Elder. Seb draws, playing a Mountain, and casts Jolene. Felix has a Forest for turn, and then pays 3 for Tayam. He passes after that. Max draws and plays a Sunken Hollow, and follows up with a Hostage Taker. As it comes in, he exiles Felix's Arcane Signet. He then passes, and Marie sacrifices the Elder at the end of turn to go and find a Forest. Marie draws and plays a Forest and casts Neyith. Seb's got another Forest for turn and pays 2 for a Gruul Signet. He then plays out the Goldvein Pick and equips it to Jolene. Moving to combat, he swings Jolene at Felix for 3. Seb makes 2 treasures from the on attack trigger and 2 from the pick for a total of 4. Felix then takes the hit and Seb passes. Felix draws and plays a Jungle Hollow, gaining 1. He then casts Fleshbag Marauder, which is pretty much a board wipe since everyone controls only 1 creature, and passes after that. Max has an Underground River for turn, and casts Araumi now that it's safe, and passes. Marie draws and casts Shadow in the Warp. I'm going to save my voice by not narrating every time this goes off, but just assume that if someone casts a non-creature spell for the first time that turn, they're taken 2. With no land for turn 4, she has to pass. Seb plays a Mountain and casts Captain Lannery Storm. He then replays Jolene, and puts the pick to Captain Lannery and moves to combat. He swings the Captain at Felix for 6, and makes 4 treasure tokens, and passes after that. Felix draws and casts his own Sakura Tribe Elder, which gets a Vigilance counter from Tayam, and then casts a Wall of Roots. Going to combat, he swings Tayam at Marie, dealing 3, and making a treasure from Jolene. He passes after that. Max has Command Tower for turn, and evokes a Knight Incarnate, giving all creatures -3/-3 as the on-death triggers. Felix responds by adding a counter to the Wall of Roots, and then activates Tayam and gets back a Blossoming Sands. He then sacrifices the Scourge Tribe Elder and goes to find a land. The board is then somewhat wiped, and after that, Max passes. Marie draws and plays a Cinder Glade. She casts a Ripjaw Raptor, and then Arnie slays the troll, which has the raptor fighting Araumi. Marie gets to draw from the raptor's range ability and passes after that. Seb plays a forest and recasts Jolene yet again, and then follows her up with a Rain of Riches. After that, he passes, while Felix puts a counter onto his Wall of Roots to make a mana. Felix draws, recasts Tayam, and passes to Max. Max replays Araumi in his main phase, and then plays a Lotus Field, sacrificing 2 lands as it comes in. Marie draws and then moves Arnie Slays the Troll to the second saga, putting 2+1/+1 counters onto a Ripjaw Raptor. She then recasts Neyith using the red from the Arnie Slays the Troll, and swings the Raptor at Seb for 6. He takes the hit, and she passes. Seb draws and equips the pick to Jolene. He then swings her at Max, who takes the hit, and Seb gets to make a total of 4 treasures. He then plays a Reckless Fireweaver with a treasure, and gets to cascade from his enchantment, hitting Strike It Rich. He then flashes it back, and this has his opponents taking 2 as the Fireweaver sees the treasures coming in. Seb then passes, and Felix uses Wall of Roots as mana ability, and then activates Tayam. He mills some cards and then brings back Safehold Elite off of it. Felix draws and plays Vizier of Remedies. He then plays a Bloodflow Connoisseur, and I should note with what he's got on field, means that the vampire could actually have infinite power, but he's got no way to attack with it immediately, and has to pass. Max draws and plays a Hostile Hostel. He then activates Araumi and makes 3 copies of the Hostage Taker, targeting the Safehold Elite, Bloodflow Connoisseur, and Arcane Signet. Felix responds by activating Tayam and gets back the Fleshbag Marauder. This has Seb responding by casting Unexpected Windfall with some treasures, and he gets to cascade thanks to Rain and Riches, revealing until he hits Feldon on the 3rd path. Felix then sacrifices his Safehold Elite, which persists but doesn't get a -1/- counter because of the Vizier, while Max sacrifices the Hostage Taker that targeted the Arcane Signet, Marie sacrifices the Ripjaw Raptor, and Seb sacrifices Feldon. The other Hostage Takers then come in and steal their respective targets, and Max casts a Bloodflow Connoisseur. He goes to combat, swinging the Hostage Takers at Marie and Felix, but then sacrifices them to the Connoisseur to add some counters to it. After that, Max plays a Lotus Petal, and then sacrifices it to help cast the Callous Blood Mage. As that comes in, he exiles Felix's graveyard. He passes after that. Marie draws and gains some life from Arnie Slays the Troll as it finishes. She then plays a forest and casts a Gruul Rage Beast, fighting time as it comes in and passing after that. Seb plays a mountain and casts a Rose Room Treasurer with some treasures and gets to cascade into an Academy Manufactor. He then casts Curse of Opulence and targets Felix with it. And then a Swiftfoot Boots, equipping it onto Jolene. Moving to combat, he swings Jolene at Felix, who blocks with a Safehold Elite for free, but Seb still gets to make a ton of treasures. With the treasures coming in, the manufacturer also makes him some clue tokens and some food tokens, and Seb gets to deal damage to his opponents based on how many treasures, clues, and food come in thanks to the Reckless Fireweaver. He passes after that. Felix draws and plays Damning Verdict. Seb pumps Jolene with treasures in response to save her, and most of the board gets wiped except for Felix's. He then plays out a Rishkar, putting a +1/+1 counter onto Rishkar and 1 into the Vizier. Moving to combat, he swings the Marauder, Vizier, and Elite at Seb. He passes once combat's done. Max plays an island and casts Soul Ring. He then replays Araumi, passing to Marie. Marie draws and plays Kolga, fighting the Vizier as it comes in, and once that's done, she passes after that. Seb draws and plays Magda with a treasure, and cascades into a soul ring. He then activates Magda to tutor for an ancient copper dragon by sacrificing some treasures. He moves the Swiftfoot boots over to the dragon, and moving to attack, swings it at Felix. He gets to make 2 treasures right off the bat from Jolene, but before damage, Felix responds by hardcasting Obscuring Haze to Fog, and Seb passes after that. Felix draws and plays a Plains. Once more Tayam comes back, and he passes to Max after that. Max draws and casts a Vampiric Tutor in his main phase. He then casts Mission Brief, putting 2 cards from his library into his graveyard, and then casts nothing, and targets the Vampiric Tutor with a flashback. He then activates Araumi to get 3 Night Incarnates, and moving to combat, 1 copy swings at each opponent. They all get blocked, and before damage, Felix responds by activating Tayam twice, getting back the Vizier, and Promise of Bunray. All the Night Incarnates then die, and basically wipe the board entirely. Once that's done, Max casts a Vampiric Tutor with the mission briefing from earlier, going to find a card, put it on top, and loses 2. Marie's got a mountain for turn, and casts Xenagos, God of Revels, and then casts a Moloch with 2 counters on it, but it sadly has nothing to fight. Moving to combat, she pumps it with Xenagos, and goes at Felix. He takes the hit, and she passes, and during her end step, Seb eats a food token to gain 3 life, and then cracks 2 clue tokens to draw 2 cards. Seb draws and casts Jolene again, using some treasures and cascading into an Impulsive Pilferer. He then moves the boots to her, as well as the pick. Once that's done, he casts a Parallel Lives and goes to combat. He swings Jolene at Felix, making a bunch of treasure tokens and a gold token, and dealing 3. He passes after that. Felix draws and plays a Soul Ring, and then pays 3 for a Fertilid. He then plays a Cathodian, and passes after that. Max draws and plays Sepulchre Primordial, getting back the Ancient Copper Dragon, the Gruul Rage Beast, and the Fleshbag Marauder. The Dragon fights the Impulsive Pilferer, the Rage Beast fights the Moloch, and the Marauder fights the Cathodian. Felix gets 3 colorless, which he uses to help activate his Fertilid twice, going to find 2 lands, and everyone then has to sacrifice to the Fleshbag Marauder trigger. With nothing else, Max passes. Marie's turn has her casting the Apex Altasaur she's had in her opening hand, and she fights the Ancient Copper Dragon. She then goes to combat, giving the Xenagos trigger to the Altasaur, and swinging it at Seb for 20. He cracks a food token to go to 21 life, but then drops to 1 as he takes the hit. Marie then casts Bushwhack in her second main phase to fight the Gruul Rage Beast, and passes after that. Seb draws, and plays a Treasure Vault. He then recasts Jolene, cascading into a Rampant Growth, which he decides not to cast because of Shadow of the Warp dealing damage to him if he does. He then moves his equipment to Jolene, and swings her at Marie, making a bunch of treasures. Before damage though, he activates her to give her 15 +1/+1 counters, and deals a total of 18 commander damage. With nothing else, he passes. Felix draws and plays Command Tower. He then recasts Tayam for a whopping 10 mana and passes to Max. Max draws and plays a Gyreach Sanitarium. He then recasts Araumi and passes to Marie. Marie draws, and in her main phase, casts Old One-Eye and gets a token as it comes in. Going to combat, she gives Old One-Eyed haste with Xenagos and pumps it, and swings it at Max, Xenagos at Seb, and the Altasaur at Felix. Before damage, she casts a Hunter's Insight on Old One-Eye, and then Felix and Seb die, and Marie gets to draw 12. She passes after that. Max draws and activates a Gaia Reach Sanitarium in his main phase, making everyone draw a card and then discard a card, and Max pitches an Archon of Cruelty. He then activates Araumi, bringing back the Archon, which as it enters, has Marie losing 3 life, discarding a card, and sacrificing a creature. The Archon has haste, which means another trigger and 6 damage is coming at her in the air, and Marie knows when she's done for, and Max gets the win. Game review time. So I'm not entirely sure who I would have chosen to attack if I was Marie that last turn. She had a lot of really good reasons to attack each player, and I think Seb definitely had to die since she had so much of his commander damage, but the question for me was between whether it was Max or Felix who was more threatening. I think Max having Encore, which does give haste, was something that people weren't expecting in blue and black, but Felix was a lot more likely to go off with combo. Seb's Jolene deck was fantastic, and Rain and Riches is so strong because it gives any spell Cascade. Not to mention that Haymaker punch that he was able to do with Jolene against Marie, where all it took was one swing to do 18 points of commander damage. That's nuts. Felix's Tayam deck was also a threat throughout most of the game, as he was basically just missing one key piece to be able to go infinite either by draining people or having a giant creature or something. I think what set him back unfortunately though was losing one of them to being stolen by Max, and then Max also exiling his graveyard. Max's Araumi deck is always a lot of fun to see, and I love making tokens from graveyards. His deck is what actually made me really fall in love with Archon of Cruelty, and I'm really sad I didn't pick one up before it spiked in price due to the demand in Modern. I've seen him Encore at once with all 3 opponents, and it is just back-breaking. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, Cool Stuff Inc., Multizone, Original Magic Art, and Alter Sleeves. But it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.